It's Sabby here with part 2 on my brushes file load experiment. If you haven't seen the first part, I put a link in the description to part 1. And if you want to skip ahead to a certain part of the video, I have left some timestamps in the description for you to do that. In the first round, I'm going to create brushstroke grids of each type of brush. Then I'm going to save the file and then just record the file size. So I'm dinosaur size right now, and I'm just pulling out the cube guide, and I'm just going to start with the first brush, and I'm going to use the color white. I make the brush the widest that it will go for each brush. And I'm just going to go all the way to the edge. So from this corner all the way to the other corner along the bottom of the edge. And I'm going to do that around the top edge as well. And then just all the way around the four sides of the cube. And then I'm just going to select this cube and go ahead and copy it 10 times to make a wall of 10. Then I'm just going to select it by selecting all and then make 5 of these walls of 10 for a total of 50 copies of the cube. And I'm just going to copy this cube of 50 and make 100. So I have a grid of 100 copies, and I'm just going to copy that grid 10 times. And I'm going to do this for every brush. And so I'm going to save a new file for each brush so that each brush type will have its own file. And then I can look at the size from there. And then from here, I just select all and throw it away. So I'm going to go ahead and recenter myself and then go to dinosaur size. Make sure I'm on the color white all the way to the top and just move on to the next brush. I'll pull out the cube guide and then just continue the process, making the 8 brush strokes on the cube and then making a wall of 10 and then on from there. So I end up making 1,000 copies of the cube, which has 8 brush strokes, and so that's a total of 8,000 brush strokes per type of brush. So I want to just mention a few brushes that gave me a little trouble working with them. Light, for instance, it was hard to see what I was doing with this one. The thing is, I was trying not to overlap any of the cubes. The sprite brushes, so this is the stars brush, they don't really follow, a brush stroke shape, and they're all over the place. So I just had to do my best and, kind of organize them in grids. And bubbles is also one of those types of brushes. But I just did my best, and I think I made some kind of grids out of them. And then hypergrid, it kind of does its own thing. So here I'm trying to make a stroke and then it does this. But eventually I got it into, a cube shape, and I was able to make a file. But I think I did a pretty good job at, making some grids out of these type of brushes. Some of the brushes were really easy to copy. This is cell vinyl, and it was really easy to work with. Some of the other ones like Lightwire, you can see it's taking a longer time to copy. Now Disco Brush gave me a lot of trouble. It took a long time to copy. So you'll see right here, it kind of looks like your screen is frozen, but the whole time, yeah, this whole time it's actually copying these 2 grids. It took a long time to copy. And it gave me so much lag while I was working in that sketch. There were points where I didn't know, if I was grabbing the grid, or you see there where it wouldn't even let go when I would release the button. So even at the end when it came time to select it all and throw it away, I couldn't even throw it away. And you're going to see me here just struggling just to even grab onto, the brush strokes. So yeah, it was pretty difficult to work with. I finally got in the right position where I could grab it and just be done with it. And I couldn't have been happier. So the tilt meter measurements, I opened the sketch and I opened the tilt meter, and then I charted the meter levels. These are the meter levels that I saw in the sketches: low, medium, high, highest, Picasso, and then tilt meter full times a number. And so most of the brushes were in the low reading, which is a good thing. Light was in the highest, in the low, if that makes sense. Fire was surprising, it was really low. And Embers was all the way up at Picasso. Stars was in the high. And Waveform was surprisingly low. Coarse bristles was really surprising because when I use a lot of it in my artwork, it does cause some lag. So here I was expecting the sketch cost to be pretty high, but it was almost unreadable. Dr. Wiggles is an animated brush, and I'm surprised how low it is. Some of the other brushes kind of surprised me that they were in the low category. Neon Pulse was the highest reading. And then the new brush, Cell Vinyl, is really low. So Lightwire was at Picasso. Chromatic Wave was really high as well. Icing was actually pretty surprising because it's a 3D brush and it has, a lot of texture. So I'm surprised it was in the low category. Wire was at medium. Disco was in the high category, which I would have thought that it would be much higher than that with all the trouble I had with it. And then the rest of the new brushes were surprisingly in the low category, being that they're all 3D brushes, so that's pretty awesome. And the second round, what I did was save 3 files per brush, and then I charted the average of the 3 files. So here I'm just in the standard background setting at human size, and I am centered right in the middle, and I'm just going to pull out the cube guide and make 2 brush strokes, one on the top edge, one on the bottom edge of the cube guide, and then just save that and do that 3 times with every brush. The reason I wanted to do a second round is because as I was doing the first round, I kind of noticed some results that were not to my expectations. So I wanted to do a second experiment just to see if the same pattern emerged as in the first experiment. And so now I'm back in the graph sketch, and I'm just going to go ahead and put my results here for the tilt meter reading, which I did in the first experiment. Here I'm just going to put all the different meter readings that I found throughout my sketches. So this first column will be the sketch costs, and then next to it I will have the brush types. And so I'm going to go dinosaur size here just to show you real quick the length of each brushstroke that I made in the first experiment. So I'm going to pull out the cube guide and turn on the distance indicator. And I'm just going to select a brush here and make sure that it's, the widest that it can go. And you can see that the brushstrokes are 2 meters each. And so here I just have my notepad where I charted all of the tilt meter readings for each brush. And again, most of the brushes were in the low category. And I'm just going to start with the first brush, Light. It was actually the highest reading in the low category. And then the next brush is Icing. And I'm just going to try and keep track of the brushes here. So you can see that all of the new brushes, like the whole brushes, they were on the higher end in the low category, but again, I'm really surprised they were in the low category, being that they are 3D brushes. So I almost forgot Comet and Snow. I was surprised on some of the brushes that were actually in the low category. And so Wire is in medium, Disco and Stars and Electricity, they're in the high category. And for highest is Toon Brush. And in the Picasso category, there's Light Wire and Embers. Neon Pulse is one of the highest in full tilt, and Chromatic Wave as well. And so I have the brushes in descending order to the right and then ascending downward. So that's going to make the Neon Pulse the largest sketch cost brush, and Coarse Bristles is going to be the lowest sketch cost. Okay, so I have all the brushes on the chart, so let's toss that. I'm going to go in, I'm going to pull screenshots of the files that I've organized from smallest to largest all the way down to 18,000 kilobytes. And then here I'm just going to put the brushes in smallest to largest for file size. This is the order of the brushes that I got from the file size of the first experiment. And the only thing with the first experiment is it was a larger file because I wanted to, really see what the sketch cost meter was going to say. But because of that, I was moving around a lot more. And I think that introduced, a few other variables that the second experiment did not have. So that makes light the largest file size and pinched marker the lowest file size for experiment 1. And it just doesn't match up with the sketch cost meter results. Let me go ahead and continue with the second experiment results and see if there's any similarities going on here. So here I'm just going to put the brushes in order from the smallest file size to the largest file size. And this is according to the second experiment where I created 3 files per brush and calculated the average. Okay, so according to experiment number 2, marker was the smallest file size and duct tape was the largest file size. So let me just label these real quick. I did notice that some of the brushes kind of stayed in their respective area, like for instance, rainbow is kind of in the middle area and it's still in the same area on experiment number 2. And then disco pretty much had the same spot in experiment 1 compared to experiment 2. And then light was, towards the end of the middle on experiment 2, but it was, the very largest file size in experiment 1. So, some of the brushes just kind of jumped around. I feel that I maybe had a few more variables in experiment 1. So what I have here are the visual properties, the file size for experiment 1 and experiment 2, and then the sketch cost meter readings in descending order all the way down to the largest. I'm just going to go ahead and write out my results here. These are the 2 brushes that I thought were going to have the heaviest file load. So that was my guess in the beginning, Disco and Lightwire. And it actually turned out that these 2 brushes did give the most lag while I was working with them in experiment 1 and making, those large grids. So I'm just going to organize these here, heaviest and lightest. And these are the brushes that I guessed were going to have the lightest file load. And so I'm just going to take copies of the smallest file and the largest file brushes according to both of my experiments and just place these here. Oops, that's the wrong way. And then I'm just going to take the largest sketch cost and the smallest sketch cost and put those in here as well. So Lightwire and Disco, they were the most difficult to work with. And then these I assumed were going to be the lightest file load, and it's marker, the highlighters, velvet ink, and cell vinyl. And these gave a shadow and these did not give a shadow. So the duct tape gives a shadow, light doesn't. It's just an illuminated brush. And duct tape is the largest file size according to experiment number 2. And the lightest file size brushes don't give a shadow. Coarse bristles do give a shadow, and Neon Pulse does not. And so it seems that if the brush has a shadow, it will affect the file size, not so much the sketch cost. So just thinking about the first experiment where I was moving around a lot more and the files were a lot larger, I feel that there were a little more variables introduced in these results. I could be wrong, but that's just kind of what I'm thinking right now. Versus where I just used the guide to make 2 brush strokes and, take the average of the 3 files. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of work with these 2 and think about these. Honestly, I can't really put my finger on what's going on with the brushes, so why, these gave me the most trouble while I was working in the large files versus why did this file size average come out the largest, but then when it comes to sketch cost, Neon Pulse was the largest and then Coarse Bristles was the smallest sketch cost. And when I use this like as grass in my artwork, I also get a lot of lag, with this brush, but it's saying that it is the lowest sketch cost. Let me take this away. At least the pinched marker and the marker were up here as well, but the 2 brushes I thought were gonna, have a high impact on file or performance didn't show up in, any of the experiments. So I feel like I have more questions now than I have answers, and this is a new medium for art, and I really feel that there's a lot more to learn other than just, how it looks. Obviously, this is a digital medium. So if anybody has any additional information that maybe can explain, some of the results I got here, let me know in the comments below. So I can say that doing this experiment, I learned that even though visually a brush looks like it, is very complicated, it may not have the largest file size or the highest sketch cost. And I also learned that sketch cost and file size are 2 different measurements. And I'm not exactly sure what sketch cost is measuring. I will definitely be having, some more experiments in the future just to maybe answer some of the questions that I have. Or I guess I could always reach out to the developers and they'll have all the answers. Okay, well, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this experiment, and I will see you here again soon.